Hello, my name is Tyler Ward, and you're listening to Life in Film, the podcast that brings the movies to life. I'm starting this podcast not necessarily to review films in the traditional sense. While I do have experience in that arena, there are lots and lots of other podcasts and YouTube channels and blogs that already exist for that purpose, many of which feature people who are far more qualified to offer a deeper level of analysis than anything that I could hope to muster. So instead, I wanted to try to do something a little bit different that I haven't really seen out of a lot of other outlets. Here, there will be two main components to the discussions that I have about the films. The first is how films make me feel and what they mean to me personally. And then the second is how the themes of those films tie into our everyday lives, the social, political, and other real-world applications of the movies that we watch. That's not to say that I won't still touch on critical analysis from time to time, but ultimately, I believe that even if a film is technically well made and touches on all of the aspects of artistry, those aspects don't add up to much if the story itself doesn't apply to the actual real world. So with that being said, today I want to discuss Nomadland. This is a film that has generated lots of discussion since its release, and for good reason. It did, of course, just win Best Picture at the Academy Awards, as well as Best Director, which Chloe Zhao was the first woman of color to win, and Best Actress, which Frances McDormand won for the third time, making her only the second woman to do so. Chloe Zhao also has a Marvel film coming out later this year, The Eternals, which has helped to put Nomadland more into the mainstream culture than what a typical Best Picture winner might otherwise be. So it goes without saying that there's a lot of reasons why people have been talking about this movie. The reason why I chose to talk about Nomadland here, however, is because of its musings on capitalism and how I feel that this is the film that perfectly captures the difficult year that was 2020. Like many of you, I've had a lot more free time this past year thanks to quarantine, and that has given me a lot of time to think. During that time, I've observed the great machine of capitalism grinding its gears and spitting out entire industries worth of lower to middle class workers, movie theater employees, waiters, hosts, musicians, and bartenders. That's how capitalism defines these people, but really they're parents trying to feed their children, students trying to pay tuition, just normal everyday people trying to make ends meet even during normal circumstances. These are the people that have been hit the hardest by the pandemic. Meanwhile, huge corporations like Walmart and Amazon continue to make record profits while small businesses have been forced to close their doors. Ultimately, the machine rattles on, of course, because those nuts and bolts that fall out aren't considered essential, a word that we've heard a lot lately. But what happens to those nuts and bolts? Some might get recycled, sure, but others will be deemed worn out and no longer useful, and therefore thrown away. This has got me thinking a lot about my place in the machine, and where I want my place to be in the future. I've been lucky during this pandemic. At first, I was considered an essential worker, and then I found a work-from-home job that allowed me to make money in the comfort and safety of my own home. I've been able to take care of me and mine during this difficult time. Others have not been so lucky, though, and as a cog in the capitalist machine, however small my role may be, what part do I play in the hardships and trials of people less fortunate? After the pandemic ends, after all, there's still going to be millions of homeless Americans, millions of willing workers without jobs, millions of children who don't get enough to eat, and I'll be sitting at home in a soft chair, taking phone calls to make profit for a company that made $7 billion in revenue last year. Why do I get to be so lucky? This film touched a nerve that has been active in the back of my mind for a long time. Back in 2018, my fiance and I had a roommate move out in the middle of the night, which led to us having to abandon our lease and owing thousands of dollars in rent to our apartment complex. This made it literally impossible to sign a new lease. So for 2 years, we bounced from temporary arrangement to temporary arrangement. We stayed at my fiance's mom's house for a while. We lived in a hotel where my fiance was briefly the night shift manager. We found a house on Craigslist that ended up being a shady deal. At one point, we loaded up what few possessions we had into our car, and we drove from Ohio to my mom's house in Florida. but lack of steady work and waning funds forced us to move back home in less than a month. During this time, we managed to gather a few $100s and bought an old Chevy Astro van, the kind with the blinds on the windows, if any 90s kids out there know what I'm talking about. And we decided that we were going to live in the van. YouTube had made quote unquote van life seem not only as an alternative to playing the lease and rent game, but as something actually better. We could be in charge of our own lives. We could do whatever we wanted whenever we wanted. We would be able to live our lives without the burden of responsibility to a society that had shown no responsibility for us. Of course, we soon found out that living in a van is extremely expensive, at least to start. You have to build someplace to sleep and someplace to store things, which is much harder than it looks. And you have to buy solar panels and mount them as a source of energy. You have to have some way to keep your food cold and to cook your food. You have to have some place to go to the bathroom and bathe and do your laundry. You have to entertain yourself without a reliable, hard internet connection. Not to mention that our van was old and would need constant repairs. So, needless to say, we found out that going off the grid is not as easy as the YouTubers make it look like. Eventually, the van broke down and we sold it for scrap, effectively ending our nomadic dream. We went back to being cogs in the machine, and in early 2020, we were able to use our stimuluses and our tax returns to finally pay off the apartment and get a new place, which is where I sit now, at my desk, recording this podcast for a film that brought up all of these feelings and memories in me on a shiny new MacBook that I was able to afford thanks to my work from home job for a multi-billion-dollar company. But I'm restless. I don't want to be a part of a machine that chews out people if they can't or don't want to dedicate their lives to it. I don't want to get chewed up by that same machine. I want to break away, to be able to live my life with no responsibilities except for myself, my fiance, and our little dogs. But I can't do that, not yet. So in the meantime, I have to live vicariously through films like Nomadland and wonder what I ever did to get so lucky. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the first episode, and I hope that you subscribe on your platform of choice. I will be releasing episodes weekly going forward. If you want to explore some of my film writing, you can follow me on Letterboxd at TW_films or on Twitter at Tyler Ward Films. Until next time, this has been Tyler Ward, and you've been listening to Life in Film, the podcast that brings the movies to life.